Welcome everyone to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross and this episode of Harmony Over Balance, Life Lessons with Dana Mahina. Dana is a distinguished executive and leadership coach and author of B is for Burnout, Not Bitch, and the host of Work-Life Harmonized podcast, where she advocates for a life of harmony over mere balance. Dana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Laura.
So tell me, what inspired you to write B is for Burnout, Not Bitch, and what message do you hope readers to take away from your book?
The title alone was worth the price of admission. Mostly I wrote it for myself, my existing clients, and the future women that I want to help, because I realized I had been labeled so many times as a bitch when really I was simply burned out. And it's time for a shift. It's time to choose harmony over balance, because balance isn't real. And it's time to also claim our power in a joyful way, where we reduce our burnout and therefore increase our joy. And let's face it, burnout is the bitch. It's not us.
It is. And there's a lot of people that burn the candle at both ends and, don't realize until it's too late. So what was your experience with that? I mean, when did you realize that?
It's an interesting question. It's not that I didn't realize along a 30-year corporate journey that I was burning out and I was getting sick. I used to joke, I'm one pneumonia away from retirement. I mean, I used to say this crazy stuff like, I thrive in chaos. And so I did. And the truth of the matter is, when you'd see my resume or meet me, or I'd give a talk or whatever the role was, the title, everyone would assume I was super successful. And perhaps in some ways I was. The challenge was I was always in the hustle culture. I was sprinting inside of every marathon. And even though logically I knew it wasn't sustainable, certainly no space or grace, which is why your program is so important, especially for myself, it also sent a real message to others that I expect the same. And so when I look back on my leadership journey, it wasn't very authentic.
Yeah. Did you feel you kind of lost yourself then along the way?
Yeah, and maybe never really knew myself until recently. Now, north of 50, I do find, especially for women, men too, we really do tend to take notice of what's working, what's not, what's our life's purpose, why are we here, what's this all about? And we also really lower the ability to constantly compare. And we actually choose to stop doing that as if it's some important thing that we should be doing is, oh, what is he doing? What is she doing? What are they doing? Who cares? What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Who cares? It's funny that you mentioned that too, because the more I do this and the more people I interact, it does seem to be, and it can be men too, but mostly, a lot of the women that are, like you said, north of 50. Why is it taking us so long to figure this out? I have no idea.
That's why you read this book. Get it in your 20s, ladies. Come on. And, for the male allies also, even my own husband, my second and final, I think I was joking with you about that on the pre-show. My second and final husband said to me, well, where's the guy's guide? We've been together 10 years, married 8. And where's my handbook? I said, read the book anyway. It's all in there.
It's covered. Yeah, I think in doing this, I think I've met at least one, and she's in her early 20s and was like already feeling burnt out. This was not her, not to work for corporate, and went into her own business. And I was just flat out amazed. I'm like, I am so glad you were able to do that. But, it seems weird when you see someone 20 something saying, where am I going with my life? And I'm like, oh my God, she's only 20 something. I'm like, wow. But
yeah, I do find generationally, like, these young people are in a lot of ways smarter than we were, because we worked hard. Yeah, we really worked hard. And part of that was the way we were brought up, especially if you're listening to the show and you're in the US. You work hard, you work forever at the same company, you retire, it's noble, you get a watch. Well, the truth of the matter is, as someone who spent 30 years in the staffing industry and as a career expert, People change jobs every 3 to 5 years on average these days. And Laura, they change careers 3 times in a lifetime. I
Wow.
believe I'm on my fourth. So of course, I like to get an A+. So I like to be above the grade.
Yeah, I think I went above that too myself. I changed quite a bit, but for our generation, that was really pretty rare. I think the new generation kind of sees their parents coming home all burnt out, and that's not what they want for themselves. So it's not that some of them may not be working harder, but I think they're working smarter and maybe
Yeah.
figuring things out at a different level.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're also, in my experience, a little bit more into self-care. It's actually a notion that dawned on them, partially because we instilled it in them. We went, now, wait a minute, we want better for them than we had for ourselves. Let's teach them about self-care and taking a minute. And, some of these kids, they're teaching breath work. I didn't even know what that was until a year ago.
I know I didn't even start hearing the whole term of work-life balance for, until like recently or until those newer generations, and that a lot of them that's what they're striving for. But like you said, you're talking about more like harmony. So maybe explain a little bit what you mean by that and the difference.
Yeah. So balance is typically about cutting yourself up into pieces. So for the listeners, imagine that you're a pie and there's all these slices. Well, I've identified in my research and my work over the years, thousands of people, that there are 5 facets that everybody has. We're all given the same 5: career, family, friendships, community, and our own well-being. And you try to slice yourself perfectly into all of those tiny little pieces, and you balance it so that someday you have this nirvana where you're like running in the hamster wheel, you're on top of a teeter-totter, and everything is perfect at one fleeting moment. And then you're exhausted and you pant and you roll out and you get back in and you start all over again. That's balance. Harmony is, I am not going to spend equal time, effort, energy. I'm also not going to receive equal pleasure, joy, and excitement from all those categories. So I'm going to double down on career because I love what I do and I do what I love. I'm going to double down on my family because it's super important to me. And I'm going to double down on my own well-being. Well, friendships are going to take a back seat. Not that I have no friends. Sometimes people say, how is it having no friends? I do have friends. I have very select and very inner circle kinds of ride or die friends, and it's quality over quantity. And community is sort of the way that you do community. I do it with my podcast. I do it with books. I have a women's group called Bloom. So I am handling community in my own way. It's not taking a whole lot of time, effort, or energy, and it still has great rewards. I'm giving and receiving, but it's not a priority. And my friends aren't really a priority. It's really my family, my self-care, well-being, and my career. That's harmony.
Hang on. Okay. Brief interruption there. All right. So anyway, as you're saying, you build the communities, right? You were talking about the communities and stuff you build, and there's nothing wrong with that because and I like that it's quality over quantity because it's not about how many friends you have. I think a lot of people get really hung up over that. It's like, oh, who can have the most friends? It's like, I know Facebook calls them friends. Doesn't necessarily mean they're all friends. There are people we're connected to and, maybe business wise or something else, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're friends.
Yes, it's interesting. I was talking to a client yesterday and she felt bad and she felt guilty. And I'm a real disproponent of guilt. I don't believe it's real, actually. I believe it's manufactured and manipulative and brought to you by many generations and religion and all the things that are made to have you feel bad about yourself when you're using guilt as a weapon. So I believe it's actually a very unhealthy tool that people use. So she felt bad and she felt guilty because this friend in a business context, she wasn't going to be able to keep working with any longer. And the truth of the matter was, he's not her friend. And it isn't that it's just business. I hate that term and people get all hung up. Everything's personal. Don't you put yourself at work and give all you can give, especially hardworking humans? Like we're giving and giving. So it's all personal. You do show up wherever you are in any context. However, it's good to know who's a real ride or die, who's got your back, whose back you've got. And it can't be thousands of people. And it probably isn't hundreds either. And
Right.
she's someone who loves to be liked. So we had a really good discussion around, how do you deal with it if you really are trying to strive for work-life integration and work-life harmony and you're getting off the hamster wheel? Guilt has a lot to do with it. It keeps us stuck in that wheel, just, killing ourselves, doing everything all at one time. And I'm not sure why. It's like, could you take a minute and ask yourself, why do I have 52 friends that I feel obligation to? Oh, it's that monthly lunch again. I got to go have lunch with Laura. Why do we do
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, exactly. And then next thing you know, you start spidering out and you start going down way too many places, and you don't take care of yourself because I think it gets borders on people pleasing
It
in a way.
does. It does. And again, if you're listening and you're a people pleaser, or you're dealing with guilt, or you're dealing with this old notion of, if I just do it all and I can have it all and all at one time and superhero, just know that we have to make trade-offs. And that's how harmony really happens. Even if you think about it from a musical perspective,
Mm-hmm.
harmony lays on top of, it's not the melody. So if you want to think about it in those terms, where do you spend the most time, effort, energy? And this is where a lot of us shortchange ourselves. Where do you receive the most in exchange for that effort and energy?
Yeah, if you spent a lot of energy and all it did was drain the snot out of you and you didn't receive anything, then I think it's time to rethink. Definitely time to rethink. It's like, yeah, is this really what is helping me or not? And it's amazing how sometimes it takes us a while to do that.
It
So,
does. It does. Again, north of 50, or just ask Laura and Dana Mahina. We'll set you straight.
yeah, been there, done that. We're there. So, when you're talking about burnout, what factors contribute to the high levels of burnout that you think are experienced by women? And have they intensified during the pandemic?
Yeah. And in fact, I don't see it getting a whole lot better post-pandemic. In fact, it's like a carryover or a hangover effect. So you really nailed it with people pleasing. That's one of the reasons that we burn out. And then we're also fixers and pleasers and nurturers. And we're so busy taking care of everybody else, we can't possibly take care of ourselves. Welcome to the road to martyrdom. It's not a cute look. And so,
I have
yeah,
no
that's
idea
one of
what
the
you're talking about.
reasons. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
gotcha.
the host, so I will let that one be for
Oh no,
now.
you don't.
When you come on my show, you'll be
Oh,
in the
I know.
other chair. That we're gonna have some fun, Laura.
Yeah, like I said, been there, done that. But yeah,
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
possibly relate. Continue. So, how do you think women and men can collaborate more effectively in environments where burnout is prevalent, both at work and at home? Because I know a lot of times we say work is work, home is home, but like you said, it's all personal. I mean, that stuff gets entwined. I think people like to think that it's separate, but one
Yeah.
often always carries into the other.
So that is such a good question. And that question in itself is multifaceted. So I'll try to take it in pieces. If I forget a piece, of course, you'll remind me. So piece number one is, we are, most of us, taught to compartmentalize. Don't cry at work. Well, when women cry at work, typically we're frustrated and pissed off. We're not weak and we're not sad. So wake up, boys, get a clue. For men, a lot of times you're taught to be brave and to not show emotion. Well, that usually translates into what's seen as low EQ, low emotional intelligence. And in fact, I find a lot of men are trying really, really hard to be more vulnerable, to be more open. And it's like foreign language class. They don't know how to do it because most of their lives they were taught that's not okay. And so it's really about being authentically ourselves, giving each other. I just love space and grace. I use that with my women's group as well, because it's not just grace,
Mm-hmm.
it's space. So taking a step back, trying to understand the other's point of view. And what I've taught my whole life, 30 years, thousands of people that I've hired, trained, developed, mentored, coached, sometimes fired, men and women, you really want to first seek to understand others before seeking to be understood yourself. And even if you're coming outside of yourself, you do take a step back. You do want to actually 360 what's going on in your life. Wherever you go, there you are. You want to actually take an assessment of, am I feeling misunderstood? A lot of people, especially women, say, I don't feel heard and I don't feel seen. Okay, why? And you want to point the finger. Well, it's him and her and them. It's probably starting with yourself. Maybe you aren't communicating effectively. Maybe you're not asking for what you need. Maybe you don't know what the heck you want. That's okay to not know what you want. I got daughters like that. And, at 20 and 24, they're figuring it out. It's okay, space and grace. So I don't know if I answered the whole question. I tried.
Yeah, no, space and grace is important. And like you said, that's kind of one of the, I think the stereotypes and stuff that we've came from our generation is that men are not supposed to show emotion. Why? I mean, it just says they're human. To me, it doesn't say they're weak. It just means that they're human. Have you ever seen it come out in men where it comes out more like anger?
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting because, again, if you're really, really frustrated, you tend as a human being to go to your lowest negative default behavior because you're human. And so if you think about taking some of the stress off, part of that goes back to this notion that I have and that I'm working on proving more quantifiably about work-life harmony over balance. Because if you're overtasked, if you're overburdened, if you're over it, you're going to be in a negative default behavior situation. You're not going to be your highest self. You may act like a jerk because you really are fried. You're burned out. And instead of taking a minute and saying, what do I need? What do I want? What do I do? We just keep plowing forward. And then poof, before we know it, things are not good.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So can you share some of your top strategies for managing burnout, including maybe tips, tools, and pitfalls to watch out for?
Well, I've made most of the mistakes myself. So yes, I would
Haven't
be
we
happy
all?
to do that. And it's interesting because in the book, I actually wrote at the end of each chapter, I don't even know where this came from. It was kind of cute. The big so what? And the big so what is, why the heck does this matter? And then again, what do you do about it? So common pitfalls and ways to avoid them include if you're starting to get a cold and it's the cold that you get every time you're exhausted, you're in the beginning of a burnout cycle. If it's worse, if you're really, really run down and because you're all smart, we can always be smarter, that it's going to be a 3-day. It's a 3-dayer, I call it. I'm going to have to be out of work for 3 days. I'm going to have to be in bed for a day and a half or two. And you hate that crap. You are in a burnout cycle. That's not like an early warning detector. You're in burnout. If you're going to have to hit reset on your life and take 3 days off of whatever it is, it's probably because you're burned out. It's also a great indicator that burnout is around the corner. If you are a high achieving person, or dare I say, I mean, bless you all. I used to be too. I'm recovering. An overachiever. I love what Brene Brown says about it. She calls it overfunctioning. And this is language in my house. So when I start not only doing 8,000 things, but now I decide it's got to be 9,000, I have an accountability partner. This is the best tip and trick I can give you. Get somebody who you love and trust and who loves and trusts you. Doesn't have to be in your own home. It might be a coach or a friend or a pastor. I don't know. Laura, by listening to the show, get an accountability partner because they will say to you, time out. Perhaps you're overfunctioning, or perhaps you don't need to stack, as we call it in my house, or pile on. When you're already over your ability to have equilibrium, there's a problem.
Yeah, figure someone to put you in check and kind of dial it back before you get into full burnout.
Exactly. I mean, old school, I would say check yourself before you wreck yourself. But, my young adult children always cringe when I say that. It's true, though. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. And the thing is, most of us care so much about each other. We don't want to hurt anyone. But the truth of the matter is we're actually hurting ourselves. So if you're hurting yourself, even if it's inadvertent, think about unintended consequences and this butterfly effect or chaos theory. One flapping of the wing causes a tornado that otherwise would have been avoided. You're the butterfly.
Yeah, definitely. And make sure that your support you get is positive and is on your side, because the last thing you need is someone for accountability is someone that's always negative or gets you going the spiraling in the wrong direction.
That's a really important point. So usually I say have an agreement in place. When
Yeah.
I'm doing X, Y, and Z, you're going to say A, B, and C. For my husband in particular, it's, I want you to tell me it's going to be okay, even though I know it's going to be okay. I'd like to hear it from someone
Right.
who is you. And then you have free license to say, do you need to be doing that right now? You said, Dana Mahina, you said you're not going to do those 7,000 extra chores this weekend, and you're piling on. And it's funny because over time you almost come to rely on an accountability partner. And sometimes it needs to be someone, like I said, outside of your own home that may be too close for
Yeah.
comfort. It may piss you off. It may have an adverse reaction. So agreements are really, really important. It starts with the agreement you make with yourself.
Yeah, which I think is kind of one of the most important ones, and keeping that agreement. Because it's like, like you said, when you go into the people pleasing and taking care, it's always putting them first. And then you start breaking your own agreements that you have with yourself. So
Yeah,
definitely important.
that's an overwhelming place to be. And a lot of people come to me because they're so overwhelmed, they don't know where to start. So I will add to that, which is if you don't know where to start by taking a breath, start by taking a step back. So if you are an aspirational entrepreneur or a solopreneur, or you've got a side hustle, or you want to do your own thing and you're stuck in a corporate gig that you don't love, which is true for so many people, what I always say is if you want to start something, you have to understand that it comes along with founder syndrome. I spent 22 years in Silicon Valley, and I have a lot of boards I sit on and founders I coach, not just in tech, in all kinds of interesting businesses. And what I find is founders are so busy working in the guts of their business, they tend to not take a step back and look up and out and down and around the 360. So that's working on versus working in the business. And eventually you lose your sight. You lose the ability to figure out what's really going on, what's a good move next. And it's true in life the same way it is in a business like that. So if you're really in it and you're like crushing it, you're hustling, you're working your butt off, that's all interesting. I want you to also think about, do you ever take a second or a minute? You don't even have to take a day. Take 15
Right.
minutes and look up and out and down and side to side and all around and shake your own dang tree.
So in a sense, you just get so focused, you get tunnel vision.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is normally never good because you can wind up missing a whole lot going on around you.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we think about it, but we're on autopilot. If you drive a car, which many of us do, we're on autopilot. We check the mirrors constantly, right? We were trained that way. It sticks. It's a safety thing. We do it. We just do it. We don't know we're doing it. It just happens. And so what I find is that harmony is a habit, and practice makes permanent, but it never makes perfect. So you have to keep practicing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know we have a lot more to dig into, but right now we need to take a quick word from our sponsor, and we will be right back.
We got soul, oh yeah, we got soul.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Relief for PTSD, anxiety, pain, insomnia, and many other ailments. Introducing Vibe, the world's only pocket PEMF device. You place it in your pocket while cooking, cleaning, relaxing, watching TV, sitting at your computer, reading, or walking. Self-contained standalone device. No drugs. No other phone or Bluetooth connections required. No monthly subscription fees. No apps to download. No Bozone. The future of medicine is in the frequencies. Come join the revolution.
So, Dana, tell us, who serves as your inspiration or muse, and how has that evolved throughout your career and personal journey, taking into account the aspects such as, family, friends, community, or self-care?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've had a couple of mentors along the way. So one of them was this gentleman named Ron. He's written about quite a bit in my first book called Stop Settling, Settle Smart, which is where I introduced this concept of work-life harmony over balance. And Ron was someone who would actually be a good accountability partner. He would say to me, "Hey, you said you're going to your kid's soccer match. It's 4:30. Why are you still in this office?" Like, he would actually come in and say, like, "Wind it up." And I would push back. I'd say things like, "Oh, one more email." He's like, "No, you need to go. Like, you made a commitment to your family, out the door," which was cool. It was cool to have such a positive male role model. Great leader, great husband, great father, just all around great guy. So I give Ron a lot of credit, and I still think about so many of the lessons he's taught me, and we're still in touch all these years later. So Ron's one of them. The other one I would say is more of who I thought I wanted to be, but realized later in life I didn't. And that was the Silicon Valley executive woman. It was women like Sheryl Sandberg, who wrote Lean In, and Marissa Mayer, who was the CEO of Yahoo. And for the longest time, I thought, oh, I need to be like them. And in fact, what they taught me is I can never be like them, and I will never be like them. Not because they're bad or wrong and I'm right and I'm better, because we aren't the same. And so comparison is the thief of joy. And that's been my greatest muse.
Yeah. And I think that's very well put, because, they always teach you, if you want to get somewhere, you have a mentor and you follow them. But sometimes you get so busy following that you just kind of like trying to duplicate them, but it's not really who you are. And you lose who you are.
Yeah. And that's really hard to recover from. So I find that a lot of people will come to me and say, "I'm not really sure who I am." And that's a scary place to be, because we're all purpose driven. We're human beings. We need purpose. We need to have something. We need to have faith in something. And however you practice faith is up to you. We're all unique like fingerprints. And I find that people that have lost their way are in a really scary place, and it hurts my heart. So I am really honored to be on shows like this, where I can help inspire others from where I've been to where I am, and to where ideally we're all going together, which is into a much more harmonious, authentic, joyful place where burnout is really like extinguished.
Yeah. And that is a nice place to be. And it's nice when you can recognize it sooner, to just say, no, not working. So in your opinion, because you've mentioned emotional intelligence earlier, what role do you think did that play in combating burnout and fostering well-being?
That is such a good question. It's interesting, because if I were to ask myself that in my 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, I would have wildly different answers. So the answer today is very informed. With age does come wisdom if you're open to it. And so what I would say is my EQ has always been fairly high, because I do care very deeply. When I assess people, I use the Strength Finders Gallup assessment I have since 2006. I've assessed thousands of people. I look at strengths and blind spots, talents and traits, way more than personality and behavior, because all that stuff is unique to everyone and it's all good. So I've always assessed really high in relationship building. I'm a relator. I care deeply about people. I will walk a mile next to you. I won't pretend to be in your shoes. Like, I'm lower in empathy, but very high in relatability. And I care. I've got a lot of compassion for humanity and others and rescue dogs. So I'm always driven by, my own ability to feel and to help people based on how they're doing. The challenge is so many times I would take in and on other people's pain, and it actually lowers your ability to have high EQ. So if you're suffering with someone, it's actually not compassion. It may be empathetic and it may be a lovely notion, but you're actually going down with their ship. And that's not a good place to be. So EQ is really about being objective and caring and kind, and not trying to be in somebody else's situation.
Yeah, and it's a hard cycle to break, because I was that same kind of person where if someone was doing something to my friends or this, I took it on. I took it personally, and it's like, it's not like I didn't have enough of my own. You take on other people's, and next thing you know, you're like a drowning ship, and it's just like you find different ways to help protect yourself. It's like, okay, I can help, but this is, I call it NMP, not my problem. Not that I don't care. I'm here to help, but I can't take it on.
And I also find that occasionally people will use that as an avoidance strategy. Again, you may not know it's what you're doing, so just consider this as an option, that this may be what you're experiencing. And avoidance is never a strategy. It's just not. And so if you're taking in and on everybody else's stuff, maybe it's to avoid your own stuff. And so EQ is also about being kind to yourself. And I know we're all sick of hearing it, but the truth of the matter is, if you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you will not help others. It's just the way it works, right? Because imagine back in that depletion cycle, you're totally burned out. You're now in bed. You can't do your work. You can't help your family. You're unavailable for anyone, including yourself. You're just trying to get through whatever the illness is. Just know stress is like that too. And stress a lot of times lays underneath the surface, and it doesn't have to be super pronounced. It doesn't have to be where anyone even knows that you're feeling so badly. And so if you're walking around with like a heightened sense of stress all the time, and then you take on other people's stuff to avoid that you're really feeling badly yourself, that has a snowball effect. And so, it's best to deal with it one little bit at a time.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's amazing because when you actually, like you said, put the oxygen mask on, or as I always tell people, it's like, I know everybody knows that one. A car person, it's kind of like topping off your oil all the time, never changing it. You're going to seize up. It's going to hurt you. But when you can figure that out, and when you can take that care of yourself, you actually show up different, not only for yourself, but for other people. And to me, I would, if you agree, I don't know if you agree or not, but you can actually be more help to others as well as yourself when you have that.
Yeah, I do agree. I just want to warn the over helpers that it's a choice. Mm-hmm. And it's a choice that you're making, whether you do it consciously or subconsciously. And so if you have given yourself that space and grace, you've taken a little time for yourself, you've figured out what you want to stop some of the people pleasing or constantly taking on other people's pain, then make a little bit of a decision as to, okay, what would I do? Like if I had an hour a week for myself, would I give it away? Maybe you would, and that's okay if it's mindful. Maybe you wouldn't, and that's okay too. And that's where I find women really have a hard time. It's like they want a permission slip. So we're going to give it to you today. We are writing you a permission slip. You may put yourself first 1 hour per week. And in fact, I would prefer 3 hours per week. 3 1-hour periods per week for yourself. There's 168 hours in every week. We actually have the time. It's amazing how we spend that time. It really is. It's remarkable.
I built mine in the morning. So 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. is my time. No one can book meetings or nothing until after that. I very rarely make an exception, and that's just because I deal with people in other countries, and sometimes it's necessary, but it's not a rule. it's an exception.
And, that's leadership, because people follow what we do, not what we say. And that's why your show is so vital. And you sharing your own story and your own best self is so important, because it's like, if Laura can do it, I can do it. If Dana Mahina can do it, I can do it. We're regular people. We are not these elitist, famous, No. Everyone reads about us in the news. And most of us are regular, everyday people. So it's important that we lead by example.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So, how do you think individuals can align with their personal values, with their professional goals to create a more fulfilling life?
Yeah. So I like to do what I call individual core values. And this is also in the book under the chapter Why for You. So the book is arranged A through Z. So if you're having a self-love day or a lack thereof, you read chapter S. If you're having a day where you are desperate to delegate, you read chapter D for delegate. If you're wanting to ask for help, but you're terrible at it, because most of us are, you read chapter H. So in chapter Why for You, it's all about your individual core values. So I like for people to know, what is your North Star? What is your guiding principle? Most people know when you ask them that question. They'll say things like integrity or family first or whatever their biggest, most important value is. Then I like to say to people, this is where it becomes really fun. Hey, Laura, if you were a product or a widget or a cool gadget or a service, what would make you super unique? Like only one Laura in the world, because people don't really understand what is unique about them and their real value. And then the final thing that really helps you align values is, what's your number one deal breaker? What is that line to never, ever, ever, never be crossed? And again, for a lot of people, that has to do with don't lie to me, don't cheat, don't steal. Sometimes people will say things that surprise themselves when I run that exercise with them, or when I hear about how they read it and did the exercise for themselves. We're in a little mini book club and all the women, even some men, are talking about it. It's kind of cool. So they'll say things like, first time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me. It's interesting what comes out in the deal breaker area. And sometimes it's softer. Sometimes it's, the same thing as what we said for the North Star. It could be family first. So if you want to take my time as a career and it cuts into my family time or my personal well-being time, that's, the morning time, that's a deal breaker for me. And imagine how we navigate relationships at work and home if we know those three important things.
Yeah, and that's true. That is important. And you've mentioned a couple of my ways, because to me it is family first, or people being dishonest. I have, or yeah, I have no time for that. those don't work for me.
Yeah,
So
right.
yeah.
Right. And the unique one's really interesting. It takes people time. A lot of people are caught off guard when I ask that question or they read it in the book because they don't really know. So think about yourself, ladies and gentlemen, as something that you are really excited about.